This is Steve Zeltzer with Pacifica, and I'm in Japan now, and there's a rally here in Osaka of over 1,000 people to protest the continued opening up of nuclear plants, the danger to Japan of a possible nuclear catastrophe similar to Fukushima. And I'm here with Eileen Mioko Smith, and she's been a longtime activist around environmental protection and all around green environment and protecting the environment of Japan and the world. Welcome.
Thank you very much. We have a robust anti-nuclear movement in Japan from the northern islands all the way down to the south. Every single nuclear power plant has a lawsuit against it by citizens and really dedicated lawyers. Having said that, we're trying to prevent a second Fukushima from happening. And it's almost like, being on a highway where you can see this huge truck coming towards you, and there's only like one lane or something, and it's going to hit. And can we stop it in time? And that's also one of the reasons is because Japan is so seismically active that...
It's part of the Ring of Fire.
Yes, exactly. And for example, the first nuclear power plant that restarted after Fukushima, it's the Oi plant in Fukui. That's facing the Japan Sea. In the case, if an accident happens, the wind blows inland towards a populated area. And even Kyoto Prefecture will be hit very severely. For example, I live in Kyoto, the big historic city of Japan. We have to take in, it's like 12,000 人, 65,000 人, 62,000 人, 62,000 refugees from northern Kyoto. And, the city of Kyoto will be inundated with refugees. But we also might have to flee. So that's the current situation in Japan, and it's really serious. And older nuclear power plants are being approved for operating longer than the original lifetime that had been designated.
And the private utility industry, the companies say that these plants are safe after 60 years, 70 years of operation. Is that true?
Well, one of the things we're really worried about, and of course this is a big worry in the U.S. and other places too.
There are over 100 plants that are decommissioning.
People in the U.S. have to wake up to the fact that we're in uncharted territory, when you're letting plants operate longer. One of the main reasons is the vessel where all the radiation is inside, in the fuel inside. That vessel has been embrittled. It's been irradiated for decades and decades, right? If it's operating for a long time, it's over half a century, and so it's embrittled. And if there's a serious accident, you have to put cold water into it. You can imagine. Just imagine your nearby nuclear power plant that has, it's like a beer jug glass, and it's been really cold, and then you go throw boiling water in it. If it ruptures, you're going to have something much, much worse than Fukushima. So we're really, really worried. I think that, with Fukushima, people realized that it's only because there was a malfunction that we were actually saved from having to evacuate Tokyo.
And the Prime Minister Khan actually was thinking about making plans to evacuate Tokyo, city of over 8 million people. I mean, that would have been catastrophic for Japan.
Yes, the top U.S. Nuclear officials and Prime Minister Khan, the Prime Minister at the time of the Fukushima accident, were discussing the fact that this might have to happen. This might happen.
And the former Prime Minister Abe and Kishida have both said that it's okay, that it's safe. They've been decontaminated. Prime Minister Abe said it was decontaminated, yet the Fukushima waste still is all over, spread out over Fukushima. How can it be decontaminated and yet the waste is still there?
Yeah, the serious problem of Fukushima continues. There's much more thyroid cancer among young people in Fukushima Prefecture. The government is saying, we've over-tested and that's why we found all these cancers, which is, kind of pretty unrealistic. There are these young people doing lawsuits. There's 7 young people who were between 8 and 16 at the time of the Fukushima accident. They all have thyroid cancer, and they've come together and they're suing Tokyo Electric. And that's going on right now. And I think it's really unfortunate because Japan's, the percentage of nuclear in Japan is now so low that we don't need it. We don't need it. And yet we're trying to resurrect all these plants post-Fukushima and have them start operating again. And it's just really unfortunate because Japan would be a wonderful country to really work on energy efficiency and conservation. The whole, society is kind of geared towards, mottainai. It means, we don't want to waste anything. We want to, it's just geared towards doing that kind of a thing. But because the government is so pro-nuclear and they're trying to increase the nuclear power plants restarting, we're losing that opportunity, and it's really unfortunate.
In the United States, the Biden administration says that, and the previous administration supported opening up these nuclear plants. And what do you think about the United States encouraging Japan to reopen and restart these nuclear plants?
Well, the U.S. is now, because the nuclear industry is in dire straits, they're really pressuring, the government officials and political, people, legislators and everything to keep nuclear power, make it be able to survive. And so, at the COP climate meetings, at the COPs, they're saying, like, we must, the latest one said triple the use of nuclear power. And that's crazy.
They call it clean energy.
Yeah, but it actually, one of the big problems is that they're not going to be able to do it, even if they tried. And also, new plants take so much time to get constructed that the end of story for climate change by the time they get started. In other words, we have to work on this right away. And building new plants will not add to that effort at all. And so you're putting money into something that won't be helpful at all to climate change, and yet you're taking that, so in other words, you're taking that money away from working on conservation and efficiency and renewables. So, people who are really knowledgeable on this say that nuclear power plants, building new ones, is actually dirtier than building coal-fired plants, as far as climate is concerned.
And I know that there are larger numbers of workers who are working on solar, who are working on non-fossil fuel energy, and yet the government seems to be committed to developing nuclear power in the United States, not only nationally, but the Governor Newsom and the Democrats passed a bill to keep Diablo Canyon open.
Yeah,
and I mean, that whole thing about the lights are going to go out.
Yeah, people in politics are either ill-informed or they're so beholden to the power of the nuclear lobby for getting, organizing votes and getting reelected or something, that they're saying that, because factually that's just completely wrong. And, and I think that really has to be advertised, that nuclear power is not the answer to working on climate change. Actually, nuclear power, the more you do it, it deters from our work on working on climate. And so we need to get that message out to the world, because the nuclear lobby has been misleading, not just the Japanese public and the U.S. public, but the whole world about that.
And there's also the danger of a world war, militarization. What's going on in Japan? Because I know the United States wants to have military alliances. They want to spend more money. They want Japan to spend more money on militarization, maybe even developing nuclear weapons here. Are you concerned about that?
Yeah, of course we're concerned about it. I mean, it would be just, such bad PR for Japan if it went nuclear, and it's crazy. But the one thing that we do know is that the Rokasha reprocessing plant, they want to restart it next year, 2024, start it up. And
how long have they been working on it?
That would reprocess 8 tons of plutonium a year if it runs full capacity. Well, less than 8 kilograms destroyed Nagasaki, plutonium. And they say reactor grade and, weapons grade is different, but no, I mean, you can make nuclear weapons with reactor-grade plutonium. And so, we're in a situation where here we're a nation that suffered the atomic bomb, dropped over massive numbers of people, in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and yet our government is about to open up the Pandora box that you can use this nuclear weapons capable material, plutonium, in civil use, meaning commercially. That's crazy.
Wasn't that Ronald Reagan? Didn't he say atoms for peace?
Yeah. So, using this material, plutonium, commercially means electric utilities use this material. That's really opening up the Pandora box for proliferation, And ironically, the place to stop it is here in Japan. The country that's, the hibakukoku, we say, that's been irradiated with nuclear bombs dropped on massive numbers of people. So we're working on this right now. Behind me, you hear people that we're working on that issue too. And I think that I just can't stress enough that nuclear is bad for working on the climate. The costs are going so high that even the running cost of nuclear power plants that already exist is at the same level as building new renewables. But the renewable costs are going down and nuclear is going up. So it just makes no sense to go nuclear. Even operating the plants that already exist and, trying to build new plants is crazy. And this issue about modular reactors, people make it look like it can happen. I mean, the head of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, Alison McFarland, did an excellent presentation about how these, modular reactors are it's just a complete pie in the sky. You're making people believe that there's some kind of solution when there isn't.
And that's in Biden's budget. They're small. They're talking about small nuclear reactors. What would be the problem with small nuclear reactors? The same problem you have with big nuclear reactors.
The problem is it can't deliver. Also, it's not a good idea. But the other is you're putting money into something that's not going to help the climate. The more money you detract from that, the worse we are going to be, not being able to work on climate issues. And it's just, what is it, misinformation that's gone out, with the nuclear industry, where people believe that.
In the nuclear industry, in the schools, put out literature in the schools telling kids that they have to have nuclear power, and nuclear power means that they keep the lights on. I mean, they're propagandizing the children in Japan.
Yeah, well, even people who are really dedicated on working on climate, really, really dedicated, they've been made to believe that nuclear could be one of the big answers. And it's so sad because these are people that are totally committed on working on the climate issue, and yet they're becoming spokespeople for, they're all men, spokesmen for, mainly, for nuclear. It's just so sad because the people who are committed to working on climate are actually advertising something that is bad for the climate. So, we need to, it's basically a, get the word out, issue, that we need to get the word out.
And you and your husband were involved in fighting to expose environmental dangers and what happened in Japan. It happens all over the world, more and more environmental dangers. That film has yet to really be shown in the United States. Why don't you talk about what is going on? Why isn't it a film that is important about the history of Japan and to protect the people of that community, and why it's not being shown in the United States?
Well, there are various reasons.
Why don't you talk about the film?
One is, of course, COVID. The premiere, this is the movie Minamota, and it premiered at Berlin's International Film Festival in February of 2020. Now, just listening to that date, you can figure out it's just before COVID really, really hit in a big way. And so that really deterred premieres in other countries and, getting it out in theaters, which is really unfortunate. But then it can be a, long runner. I mean, you can see it you can see it now streaming, various ways. I think it's an important movie because it shows that really a country that is an image of a, developing and developed country had this situation happen, which is a serious pollution disaster, mercury pollution, methylmercury pollution from industrial waste. And it's a story of people suffering tremendously, a huge number of people, and yet rising up and getting a measure of justice. So it's very empowering in a way. And I think it's really empowering for people all over the world who are fighting pollution. At the end of the film, if you ever see the film, you gotta stay there for the credit roll, because it shows case after case of worldwide pollution, other kinds of pollution, and how globally so many people are suffering from it, industrial pollution. And there's a huge impact. So when you see the movie, go through the end rolls. And it was filmed in Serbia, so you can see all the Serbian names. These are people who were kids and very young people during the war. They were the ones that were the makeup artists and the set the people, technicians, and everybody. It's very moving. I mean, tons of extras there. They're regular citizens. Japanese people who live in like Poland and Czechoslovakia and eastern part of Europe. They all came to be extras. So many people came. And it's starring Johnny Depp, who is controversial, but he does a really good job, and some scenes he looks so much like my husband that one time when I was there, part of the time when I was shooting it, and he was outside, and I was sort of like not thinking for a moment, and I go, oh, he's out there, I got to go see him. Well, he passed away in 1978, and yet it was like, oh, why is he out there? He's out there, I got to go see him. It was like really strange. So
struggle to protect the people of Minamota from the pollution. Is that one of the reasons you got involved in green action and fighting around nuclear power?
Oh yeah, definitely. I got involved with becoming an activist because of Native people, Ojibwe people up in Northwest Ontario. They were suffering from mercury pollution, and when I found that out, I wanted to do a victim exchange. The people from Northwest Ontario, the reservations, Grassy Grassy Narrows and White Dog. I organized it so that they came to Minamata and actually saw what could happen, and then Minamata victims went over there, and I started this exchange, kind of like connecting people, because I think when you connect, then the people who are actually suffering are really empowered, And that's how I kind of slipped into, from photography into activism. And then that led to doing interviews at 3 Mile Island. I've been there 7 times and lived there, stayed there maybe a total of 1 year. This is after the accident, Pennsylvania accident in 1979, the first serious nuclear power accident. And hearing what the people were saying, because they really recognize and experience many direct effects that's not in the U.S. Government study of the accident at all.
Just the trauma, of living through this, is traumatic. It's...
Yeah, and so it was incredibly moving. So many people had a metallic taste in their mouth, and some people felt this thing going through them. People who really knew the fields, the farmers knew that the snakes disappeared. Veterinarians realized that there was an increase in cancer a few years later. People who really love vegetation saw that the vegetation had been affected. Anyway, I came back to Japan with that information, and then everybody in Japan wanted to know about it, meaning everybody trying to work on stopping nuclear power, which were people in fishing communities and agricultural communities all over Japan, because nuclear power plants are usually sited in these gorgeous places there in the countryside.
And they bribe people who are rural or poor communities to take these plants.
Yeah, but they were fighting it, and so they wanted to hear about what had happened, and that ended up with me having a tour of people who are really, people of the land, right? Fishing communities and agriculture people, and also, regular people, school teachers, and different people, walks of life, working on trying to prevent nuclear power plants from being built in Japan. And so I ended up kind of on a tour of the anti-nuclear movement in Japan, and that got me involved with trying to stop nuclear power in Japan. It's so earthquake prone. We got to stop this. We really tried, but then when Fukushima hit, we thought, gosh, the first one finally hit,
And recently they've dumped the water. They say that the tritium in the water is safe, and apparently the IAE has supported that. Do you trust the government that this water is going to be safe for people?
Well, one thing that's very important is that in Japan stresses that China's opposed, and that's so, China's terrible, and the Pacific Islands opposed it. And their experts said that there's all sorts of unknowns, like, only a portion of the tanks containing this material have been tested, and the number of radionuclides that have been tested is limited. And also the simulation on how it bioaccumulates is done totally improperly. And so, it's an unknown, right? And so, okay, the first dumping happened, maybe that's not the end of the world, but it's going to go on for 30 years. And so, we really have to stop it because there aren't studies on, what will actually happen.
So they really don't know what the cumulative effect of this dumping of the water in the
Yeah, it's not scientifically, studied properly, And we have to remember that the IAEA, one of the missions of the IAEA is to promote nuclear power. So you can't ask them to give the whatever we call it in Japanese, it's called osumitsuki, which means it's okay.
Stamp of approval.
Stop on it, stamp of approval. Yeah, yeah. So, and there's a lawsuit going on right now. The fishing community and Fukushima citizens are plaintiffs, and there's a lawsuit going on to try to stop the discharges.
Okay, well, thank you for joining us and talking about this history, the struggle, what's going on today, and also the future.
And I want to tell all people in the U.S. who are listening to this, find out what your evacuation zones are. You think you might not be near a nuclear power plant, but when people have to flee, they will maybe come to your town. I think that everybody has a friend or a relative that lives in an area that will be affected by a serious accident in the U.S. if it happens. And there are lots of nuclear power plants in the U.S. and they're being allowed to operate, when they're going to be really old, and the story isn't over yet, So, raising your voices might be the thing that actually, saves disasters.
Well, they wanted to build 30 or 40 nuclear power plants in California, and that was only stopped by mass action of people protesting.
That's the last thing I want to say is after the Fukushima accident, it was really serious, right, economically too. But the day was saved by the anti-nuclear movement, not just the movement, but all the citizens that opposed nuclear power plants from being built. Because had they not been successful, Japan would have been dependent on nuclear power much, much more. It would have been like France if that hadn't been successful. And then we would have really had a financial disaster because we had to shut all the plants down. It was hard enough in Tokyo with lack of electricity with Fukushima, but if we had been so dependent on our electricity to nuclear, then we would have had a much bigger economic hit. And so these people save the day, but kind of it's not known because when you save the day, nobody realizes that your day was saved.
Thank you for joining us.
Okay, thank you.